Hey, everybody, DJ the Suit Stout here. Thanking you for tuning in today on our second episode of our Charlotte Sports Originals. Today, Frank and I welcome two legends in the newspaper business here in Charlotte, Tom Sorensen and Stan Olson. If you grew up in Charlotte or spent any time in Charlotte over the past 30, 40 years, you certainly read their articles in the Charlotte Observer sports page and also heard them on WFNZ back in the day. Tom still on John Boy and Billy as we speak. So two guys that have seen it all when it comes to sports in Charlotte, and two guys that I've always been very fond of and enjoyed working with in the past, and I'm excited to have them on the show today. So before we get you started on that, because I think you're going to love it, I will tell you that we did have a piece of equipment go out during this podcast, so the audio isn't going to be as clean, as crisp as it usually is, but it's fine. You can hear it and it should be just fine. But the podcast, the people that we did show it to liked it so much that they said that we had to release it and get it out and let you guys watch it, even though there were a few technical problems. So deal with that as best you can. Hopefully it doesn't bother you. You might not even notice it, but wanted to get on and tell you that ahead of time. And thank you again. Spread the word, subscribe, share, like, all those things. And we appreciate you.
This is Suit Up Sports. Suit Up Sports. Where opinions are as sharp as a tailored suit. No fluff, no gimmicks, just unfiltered, hard-hitting takes on sports and a whole lot more. It's time to suit up. Now here's your host, DJ the Suit Stout.
Welcome to Suit Up Sports. I'm DJ the Suit Stout, along with 10-year NFL vet Frank Garcia, and today we're doing installment number 2 of Charlotte Sports Originals, and we are pleased to be joined by two guys that have been
legends,
been in the Charlotte market for a long time. Stan Olson, 40 years at the Charlotte Observer and 20 years on WFNZ, and Tom Sorensen, 35 years at the Charlotte Observer and 20 years at WFNZ. Guys, how you doing?
I'm great, man. Life is great, and it's cool to be here.
You guys just don't know what it's going to be like to be retired.
I can't wait to find out.
Cool. I've been retired for about 20 years. I don't know about you.
Frank's been retired. Yeah. I'm still divorced throws retirement back by 10 years. Yeah. So I still got a ways to go, unless my kids hit it big, which maybe they will. But thank you guys for joining us. And this is the Charlotte Sports Originals bonus podcast
series,
that Frank and I have been doing. Mark Yarbrough was our first guest, and it went great, and everybody loved it. So I figured you guys would be perfect for the second one because, like I said earlier, you guys 40 years, 35 years at the Observer, covering all the teams here. You guys saw, day one of the Hornets, day one of the Panthers, and so on. So
these guys covered me or the team and probably seen me naked more than you have.
Whew.
Yeah.
Well, I never have, that I can remember, but hopefully, yeah. Hopefully
that's probably something they don't want to remember, and they've put in the back of their head.
I would hope not.
No.
But that's a good question to ask later. We could talk about, like, who did they see naked that was really impressive?
Well, unfortunately, I've probably seen more penises than a porn star. So. I was going to say Frank would be the go-to guy. Yeah. And there's some that are very impressive. I'll tell you. Yeah.
Man, sports soccer locker rooms didn't look like that.
No. Dan Footman. The first name that comes to mind. Oh, we're in Cleveland, boy, and I tell you what, Blake Brockemeyer. This is our first year. We're down there, and they're in some little dungy locker room. The Browns were, kind of one of those throw-together teams the dinosaurs went to die. And it was right by the airport, and literally was we're practicing in a dirt field and in a high school locker room. So when we came back from practice, we all had to share the same showers. And, the Panthers were on one side, the Browns were on the other, but when everybody shared, it was a communal shower. So, when guys go shower together, usually, proper spacing. It's proper spacing. It's proper spacing. It's like when you go to a urinal, you don't want to go crowd the guy next to you up for 2 or 3, right? So you leave one in between. Well, with everybody in there being overcrowded, the other team had to come in. Oh. And Brockemeyer's like 2 down, and I'm here sitting in my shower, just kind of minding my own business. and here comes Dan Footman. He's about 6'5", 275 pounds, and his name fits. So we didn't say much. We're just kind of like, okay, let me get out of here real quick before I embarrass myself. Brockemeyer and myself, we were right next to each other in the locker, and we go sit down, and we don't really say a whole lot, but we look at each other. We give that, holy shit, did you see that thing? And, that's the way I'm sure his nickname fit. Yeah, but definitely did.
You know what I got to say about this? This is not WFNZ.
Yeah, you can talk.
Some of the stories I got a great story. We have
podcast. You can actually get away with anything, but we don't want to.
Yeah.
Well, the only thing I can add is when you'd go to the Hornets locker room in the old days, you had to be really careful where you stepped. When you were lifting your feet up, you were looking around.
Yeah. That's right. I mean, and those guys are 7 foot.
Yeah.
Elgin Campbell was 7 foot.
Get to the
And
ground.
they're
It takes
also
a long time. Well, let's start with the Hornets, because both you guys were here when we got the Hornets, and obviously that's been a crazy ride from day one, and then the George Shinn stuff and the Bobcat stuff, Michael Jordan stuff. I mean, it seems like nothing when it comes to Charlotte sports is ever easy. But tell us a little bit about that when you guys were covering the Hornets when they first came.
Well, how did they get here first? I mean, because I remember how the Panthers got here. Jerry kind of stuck his neck out, him and Hugh McCall. But the Hornets, I have no idea the history of when they first got. I mean, I remember the team.
Yep.
Even wherever I was at. I mean, it was a great logo, great colors. But how did they originate, and how did that come about?
George lobbied Shinn, and he had some really good backers. He had Rick Hendrick, he had Felix Sabates, he had Cy Bayheckle, all guys who are known in town, all guys who had money. He took a lot of crap. I remember a guy in Phoenix wrote that the only franchise Charlotte will have golden arches. And but George was really good at sales. He could make you believe even if there was no truth to it. And he did have, Hendricks is a great guy. Felix is a great guy. Didn't know Bayheckle as well, but they were all credible. And they all just kept coming. And you look at a map and you're thinking, man, there's nothing between D.C. and Atlanta, so why not? And it was a celebration. I mean, as big a deal as the Panthers were, a thing can only be new once. And it was spectacular for Charlotte. It was, and once they beat the Bulls and Michael Jordan once at home, you could not get a ticket.
Mm-hmm.
Any guy, I don't care what you look like, could get a date if he had 2 tickets to a Hornets game. I mean, it was a big deal for Charlotte. And it'll never be like that again.
And what did they do? Sell out like the first 6 years?
Oh, they had an incredible fan base.
Oh, unbelievable. 24,000.
The old Coliseum. And I remember coming here in like 95, and it was the same thing what you just said, Tom, is that you couldn't get a ticket. You couldn't get a ticket. But it was incredible.
I worked at this is not their first year, but soon thereafter, I worked at a video store. It was called Thumbs Up Video, and they had several. But the one I worked at several, but the one I was working at this night was in Hickory Grove off of Harris Boulevard. And a lady used to come in there, and she was a bigwig with the Hornets. I think she might have been George Shinn's assistant. I don't know, but she had a big job, very pretty lady, always dressed nice. And she would always come in there and rent videos. And once I found out she worked for the Hornets, I was like, all right, I got to get tickets. And so I cut a deal with her that, you give me free tickets, and then sometimes I'll give you free videos. And just so happened the seats were like literally center court, like 20 rows up.
You're kidding.
Oh man. And almost every game we'd be sitting with city council. It finally stopped because me and my buddies would get too rowdy, and we're talking about John Boyer.
Theirs was a bride, right?
Yeah, exactly. Well, we had a fraternity brother that ran one of the beer stands out there, and the way that they kept up with how many beers they sold was they counted the cups. And so we would go there and we would buy our first beer, and then we would just bring them the cup back. So we would just, we'd have like 12 beers.
They weren't very smart.
Yeah. Yeah. Technology has changed that.
That looks
so. Yeah, the Hornet games were fun. I mean, you're right. You couldn't get in them. I mean,
what years are we talking about here? When did the Hornets originate? 88. So several years before the Panthers came to existence.
Yep. Either one of you name the first starting lineup for the Hornets?
Kelly Tribuca.
Yep.
And I'm done.
Head coach.
I think Muggsy was a point guard, right? Or maybe not.
No,
Muggsy wasn't there yet. I don't think.
Rex.
Yep.
Rex, because Rex was the first #1 pick, right?
Kurt Rambis, maybe?
No.
That first year, not Rambis.
No, Rambis was still with the Lakers.
No, Rambis was here the first year, I think. Earl Curitan.
Vladdy?
Twirl.
No, that was for
Vladdy came later in
Maybe Rambis was here then. I'm thinking about Vladdy.
I think
Yeah,
was
Vladdy came in the deal
for Kobe.
where we gave up Kobe.
Yeah.
Dave Hoppin. Tim Kempton.
Tim Kempton might have actually started at center, maybe.
Hey, Tim Kempton was Sorensen's favorite guy, man. You loved him. Man. What was he called?
I
Something
liked
like big Red Donut or something like that.
No, he said he could eat an entire Whopper. He could put an entire Whopper in his mouth. So wrote about that. Doug Robichek wrote about it, and he did. He got the whole thing in his mouth. I remember Rambis going to him saying, Tim, just because you can do something, maybe you shouldn't do it. He just looked like this goofball, but he got the whole Whopper in his mouth.
Yeah.
It wouldn't happen in today's NBA.
No.
I remember we would for years. I would cover like the shoot arounds in the morning for FNZ, and I'd go there. And I remember when Larry Johnson was a rookie, and I was a huge Hornet fan, and Larry was just
was that 91, 91 when they drafted LJ.
91 or 92.
Grandmama.
Yeah. And I was with my uncle, actually, Paul Shad. He happened to come there that day for some
He's your uncle?
Yeah.
Is he really?
Yeah.
That's cool, man.
Yeah, he actually retired, man. He's got his big retirement blowout party.
Tell him I said hello. I knew him way back in the day.
Yeah, his stories. He'll be on here at some point too, because he's been here forever. And, and he's a legend in that. But I remember Larry Johnson was there, and my uncle was there for some reason. And my uncle had a T-shirt of the radio station he was working at, and he gave it to Larry. Hey man, here's a T-shirt, whatever. And you could see Larry kind of like, I ain't gonna wear this damn T-shirt. And my uncle was like, well, dude, just use it to dry your car off after it's washed, or he gave him several other reasons to use it for. And Larry just started laughing. And then I think he interviewed him and whatever. But going to those shoot arounds and seeing those dudes, like I remember, like Brad Doherty with Cleveland, like you just see these guys in real life and how big they were and just how agile they were. Yep. And
watching them on TV definitely doesn't do justice until you get there and you stand next to these guys and you see how fast they move, because when everything moves at the same speed, you really don't see or feel. It's like going to NASCAR and seeing these cars go around in circles. But when you're there and you realize they're going 200 miles an hour and they're an inch away from each other as they're simultaneously sliding up the track.
Yeah.
I mean, it's impressive that, and these guys can move and, react as quickly and as big as they are.
Yeah, no doubt. Any Hornet stories over the years that really stick out to you? Like I know that the last podcast with Mark Yarbrough, I told the story about when Bobby Phills passed away and how that we were on the air and I was answering the phone and John DeLong called us and we told that whole story. So I know that's probably one that everybody remembers, but any other ones that really stand out, or any times you got into a pissing match with somebody, I'm sure you got those too. Definitely Tom stand
that
out.
would be him.
Well, I mean, to add to that, I want to know, about George Shen. I mean, we hear stories all the time and, the media sometimes, not necessarily you two guys, but they kind of hide things, or they don't give you the full story of things. They write the paper, but they take their end like that. What actually happened with George Shen, and why did that whole thing come to fruition?
He was dishonest. He was so popular initially, people were trying to get him to run for governor.
Yeah,
and it just went to his head, and he was so accustomed to people saying yes, George. And it just kept growing and growing. And it started to turn off some of the players, people around town. I brought in a guy named Ray Woldridge, and he was one of the most dishonest people I've ever met. But I remember he called me in for a meeting one time. It was him and it was Harold Coppin, the PR guy, good guy. And he had a legal-sized yellow pad full of stuff, all the stuff I'd written that he thought was unfair. And he just went over it. And what I learned is that meetings like that, don't talk. Just let the guy talk and burn himself out. And he did. But he would, remember another reporter came up when George criticized me in front of a group. Guy said, I'm sure I'm happy that's not me. I said, I'm happy it's not you too, man. I wrote the truth.
Yeah.
But he, now we're friends. When he moved the team to Oklahoma City or to New Orleans, and then he got Oklahoma City, then they made him go back to New Orleans. He didn't want to. I went out. I love New Orleans. So I said, look, let me go out there and he'll talk to me. They said, do you have an interview set up? I said, no, but if I'm there, he'll do it. And I went out there and he had a couple people saying no, but I had a friend at the Times Picayune, the paper there, so just talked to him. And he was old George again. He was happy. He was upbeat. He was meeting people. He wasn't this dishonest guy he'd become. And we've been friends since. And I see him now. I mean, I got his number. What was funny, I've gone to a couple reunions. One of them, he's got long hair. He's got a beard. And he said, I looked at him. He said, I know. He said, I would have fired me. But he has a sense of humor. And then his wife, she's younger than he is. And she said the perfect thing that a woman would never say about me. I said, where'd you guys meet? She said, oh, on his yacht.
Shocker. Yeah, he loved lovely women. But yeah, that whole thing. And I tell you, when the Hornets really started, I think kind of to wear on people, obviously the George Shinn stuff, but when they traded Alonzo to Miami, I think that kind of started the whole, I mean, what are we doing here? We got, one of the best centers and the guy that gives 100% every night.
Sure.
And when he traded him to Miami and I've always heard, and you guys may know better than I do, but I'd always heard that Alonzo wanted to stay. Like he did not want to leave. And he was asking for a fair deal. He just wanted to be paid. Yeah, he just wanted what was fair, and Shinn would not even do that, and that's when it all went down.
But did they have a good relationship?
They were okay. Alonzo and Larry were not.
Is that the two that butted heads and the reason why there was the separation?
Yeah, and they got in a fight. And
it's kind of like Kobe Shaq.
Except that fight wouldn't have been fair.
Yeah.
This fight was, they really went at it. I think the game was in Miami, but they were not getting along. And I'll tell you, Larry's a guy who, he's small for a power forward, but he's a lot bigger than me. He did not like me at the end. I remember walking up to his locker, first game of the season, and he goes, "What's up, bitch?"
No way.
And then he said a few other things and followed that. I remember going home, pouring a drink, and I said, "Man, only 40 more home games."
Tom turned to Larry and said, "Well, how come you guys never score when you run Dallas at the end of the game?"
Yeah.
Remember that play?
Alan Bristo's favorite play.
It was terrible.
Alan Bristow, our coach, he was not a very good coach in my opinion, but he would run this play when we needed a basket at the end of the games, and he called it Dallas because Larry Johnson was from Dallas, and it was really, he would just give Larry the ball up top, and Larry would just do whatever he did, and the percentage of it working was probably like maybe 20%.
I'd say
maybe not even.
And it fell every time. It increasingly went down.
Yeah, it really did.
I mean, the whole crowd would be like, "Oh, they're going to call Dallas.
Let's get a drink."
Yeah, they'll get a drink. They'll call Dallas. I mean, and not only that, not only that, the other damn team knew when he said Dallas, so they knew exactly what was coming. And so, oh man, Alan Bristow, those were some. God, he would get madder than any coach I think I ever remembered. I used to think they needed to put like a pad next to his chair that he could just kick whenever he got mad, because he would lose his shit, take his jacket. I mean, I did like that about him, but
it's interesting hearing you talk about some of the other players, because you guys covered the Panthers as well, both of you guys, and it's interesting how different characteristics and guys mesh with different guys. I've always got along with both you guys, but I did have some problems with guys in the locker room, and Darren Gant was one of those guys, and I went and told him to his face, one time, and we just didn't see eye to eye. So, but to hear you guys say it, I mean, the one thing I'll give both you guys credit for, and I've told you this, publicly before, is that you guys, you told a story, but you were honest and you were fair, and being fair is all, as an athlete, you can ask for from a reporter, because there's some athletes out there that feel that these reporters are self-deprecating and getting things us to say things so that they could go out and make money and get us to say quotes. And
now they would call it clickbait.
Yeah, I mean clickbait. There you go. That's what it is. Yeah. They would use clickbait to get us to say something, and then they would only use half the story. Which we see a lot more now. But you're young, you're naive, and you're a little vulnerable when it comes to media. And these guys are sharp, and they've been doing this forever. And we really are just kind of trying to be open and honest, but there's some things that, guys are going to get, upset about when the stories don't come out the way that they think they should.
Frank, I'll tell you one thing that really affected us back when we used to work. You had just this limited amount of space. And I cannot tell you how many times, and Tom will say, probably, well, now you got to write whatever you want. But
a little more freedom, flexibility.
The columnist. He's a columnist, man.
Yeah, he can do what he wanted to. Yeah.
But the thing with the reporters and cover out a million stories go, no, you cut that paragraph. That's the meat of the whole story.
Yeah.
You know, and you would sit there, and it's not their fault. They're working on deadline. They're trying to get things through. You say, you've got 16 inches for this story, and he wrote 19. Get 3 inches out of it, you know? And a lot of times, clip it off the bottom. Clip it off the bottom. That's where you're ending up and summing things up.
And you guys had no say in that? Like once you
we'd be gone home. We'd be gone home.
Yeah.
And then
Last call.
There's happy hour. Tom and I were 5 beers in by the time that happened.
Hey, one Hornets story I just thought of. There was a guy who played. I'm not going to name him. He was pretty good.
See if I can guess it.
He was a guard, and there was a bar they'd go to after games, and I went. I didn't usually go, but I went there, and for some reason, I knew this guy's family. I knew his wife, and he was with a woman, very blonde, who was not his wife.
Definitely not gonna say
And
that.
so he comes up and he looks at me and he's like in terror. I just went, I was a human before I was a columnist. Yeah. I'm not going to tell on a guy. I would never do that to anybody. I wouldn't tell another person what I'm telling you guys now. But
yeah,
his secret was safe. He was so worried. I could have milked it.
But both of you guys had that ability to do exactly what you just said, Tom, is that if we were talking to you, we felt like it was safe.
Yeah.
And that's a great word to use, because I could be honest and I could be vulnerable, right?
Yeah.
Versus, trying to guard my words and walk on eggshells to say what I'm going to say, where some guys don't have the ability to do that. And they don't come across in the best way. So I think that was both your guys' gift and why you're able to break through those barriers, with athletes, except for maybe,
well, and I'll say
it was good for a while. I just wrote that Kendall Gill should be traded for, I think, Kenny Anderson. And he was friends with Gill by this point. He didn't think I had any right to do that. So Ron Green Jr., who was the beat writer, said, look, he's a columnist. He has an opinion. I don't care. He's wrong. So that was the genesis of that. But they were cool to be, especially those early teams. I still see Dale. I still see Muggsy. When I run into Rex Chapman, it's like we're old friends.
Yeah.
Kenny Gaddison.
Remember you talking about a bar after the games? When Gaddison played for the Hornets, he had his own bar called Gaddison's. I want to say it was over in the South Park area. I don't remember, but
it was right around, I thought, like Colony Road.
Yeah. I mean, it had to be somewhere out this way, but me and my buddies would always go there after the game, and you'd be sitting there, and then here would come the Hornet players, and Gaddis would walk, or like he'd grab you on the shoulder, even if you'd walk to every table and say hey to everybody.
He's a good guy.
Great guy.
Good guy, man.
And those Hornet teams, you can't help if you grew up in Charlotte when the Hornets are here. Those teams were really like the best of Charlotte sports. It was new
because it was first.
Yeah, and I never followed the NBA. Like I was college hoops 100%.
Yeah,
and I remember my dad, who worked at Haverty's Furniture, and he ran their warehouse. And he came home one day and he goes, "Hey, my boss offered me tickets to go see the Hornets. Do you want to go?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll go." So we go, and I don't know how old I was, probably 15, 16, or whatever. And there were good seats behind the basket, and the first, I think we were playing the Joe Barry Carroll Nets or whoever the hell he played for. But the first 3 quarters, I literally was bored shitless. I was like, this is awful. And then the 4th quarter happened, and it was like, bam, and it got me. And that was it. I mean, after that, I was in. And one of my best buddies, Matt Wilson, and I, we lived together in college, and we didn't miss a game. I mean, we'd wake up in the morning and be like, all right, Hornets at 7:30. All right, what time's your classes? What time's your classes? All right, who's going to get the beer? Who's going to get this? And, I mean, every game. And then the home games, we would always find a way. The game when Alonzo hit the game-winning basket against Boston.
Oh, man.
My mom somehow got us tickets, and we were in the last row, upper deck. And you remember that big-ass old Coliseum.
Oh, yeah.
It was 23,000 strong, and me and Matt and my mom were like 22,998.
And
that roof coming right down my head.
Yeah. Well, you guys have seen some great events in this city, obviously, and I agree with DJ. Is that I've been fortunate enough to play in some and see some as well. There is nothing in the world like a home NBA playoff game, where you got your entire crowd cheering you on. Everything's so close. You're right on the court. energy and electricity that goes through that.
I don't even remember what that feels like.
Oh, it's been a while.
It's been so long.
Yeah, I mean, I think Kemba 2014, 13, maybe before that. Before they were the Bobcats, or right after they turned to the Hornets.
Back.
Yeah, but there's some.
Is there a Hornet game that does stand out? We're going to move to the Panthers. Is there a Hornet game that stands out more than any, that where you even doing your job, a little fan comes out a little bit?
Yeah, I remember going to a Hornets game where I lost my car in the parking lot.
I did that too.
Did you do it?
I did.
You remember how they had the stuff spread out?
They had 4 lots basically.
Oh, yeah. And we were in one that looked exactly like the one we were actually in. And me and my buddy, you remember Chad, and we
Chad.
we leave a little bit early because it's over. It's over. So I normally would not leave early, but
it's okay.
Yeah, it's all right.
15-point. Thanks, guys. But we go out and we said, let's go together because we're going to go drink, right? Go have a few beers. And we go out and we're looking. I said, my car was right here. It was here. I promise you it was here. And he said, well, we just got to do the rows.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, cars are leaving. And I said, we got to call the police. My car's been stolen. It's been stolen. Yeah. Who steals an 89 Camry? Nobody steals one. And we literally looked for it for over an hour. And finally it was like, it's not here. It's not this whole section because everybody's gone.
Yeah.
Went over to the next section. There it is, sitting right there.
I had the same
So this
thing.
wasn't going to be like an Allen Iverson story where or he goes to Vegas, but has a Ferrari, goes and forgets where he parks it. So he says, screw it. Goes buys another one.
Stan went and bought a 90 this night.
Yeah.
I was at a game. This was, when at that same old Coliseum.
Yeah.
And I usually would park at the farmer's market behind it because a buddy of mine's uncle ran it, Mr. Sutter. So we would always park back there. And this time, though, I parked in the front. And at the time, I had a black 740 BMW. And
I remember that car.
Yeah, and I had a new record
Pitmobile that used to drive to the softball games.
Yeah, it was a sweet car. Yeah. But I had a new record girl flying in. It was my first time meeting her. And so, I said, why don't we go to a Hornet game? So I go pick her up. And, real pretty girl, whatever, we're talking, we go to the game and same thing. I think we stayed like halftime or whatever. We're going to get a couple of drinks just to talk business. And we're walking out and I'm like, where the hell's my car? And she's like, are you sure you parked here? I'm like, yeah, I mean, this is where I parked, right? I mean, I've come to 1,000 games. Same thing. We look everywhere. Yep. And here a cop comes driving by and I wave him down. And I said, hey, officer, I think my car's stolen. And he looks at me and goes, no, it wasn't. And I'm like, what do you mean? No, it wasn't. He goes, no, it wasn't. Get in. And I probably had some drinks too. Now I'm going, shit, did I just set myself up for this? We get in the cop car and he drives us over. He don't know what I drive either. He drives me over. Damn, there's my car. And I said, how did you know that? He goes, this happens probably 30 times a night. Probably 30 times a night, people think their car's stolen and call the cops. So
because the sections look exact.
Yeah, they had 4 exact sections. You don't know. And so, that's funny that 2 of the 4 of us thought our cars were stolen at Hornet game.
My moment really had nothing to do with my vehicle.
Thank God.
I'd gone up to Boston when the Hornets played the first ever series against them. And some of those guys who ran the team were so condescending. You guys find Boston okay? You find the gym okay? Being from Charlotte now, you're sure okay?
Yeah.
And this is the team officials. So they really wanted to win. And that game where Alonzo hit the winning jumper, that was as good as sports in Charlotte.
I agree.
And just to be in there and the way that he was swarmed. And when I talk to him now for a story, and I've talked to him since he's been with Miami, he just smiles when he talks about it because that was so big for him too.
Yeah, I mean, listen, when we got Alonzo, first of all, you're pissed because we missed Shaq by 1, right?
Right.
Which seems to be the story of the Hornets as well too. Larry's really the only one that we ever. So we missed Shaq, so he goes to Orlando number 1. We get Alonzo number 2. There's a holdout, so Alonzo doesn't get here until right before the first game. And I don't remember who our first game was against. Was it at Boston? It might have been.
I was there. I think it might have been Indianapolis.
Okay,
I'm not sure.
And Alonzo played, which I was, no one thought he was going to play, and he played, and he played great. But at the time, no one really knew that he could even shoot a jump shot.
Yeah,
because he has that long delivery and whatever. And so like to once we as fans started learning that this dude can pretty much do it all. And the thing I loved about him is he just, he was 100% always, which is, you don't say that often about guys. And but same thing when he hit that shot, and he goes to the ground, and Del Curry, I think, was the first one on him, and then they're piling on. 23,000 people going crazy. I mean, walking out of that stadium, that arena that night was as fun as, I mean, everybody was like they were family, hugging, high-fiving. I mean, it was the first thing in Charlotte, really, sports-wise, that, you know, had ever happened like that. And
kind of put you on the map, kind of put Charlotte on the map.
Look, the Hornets, that's the thing about the Hornets that drives you crazy. They had some really good teams. I mean, even those Baron Davis, you know, they had some good teams.
Yeah,
they just never have been able to, you know, get over the hump.
Oh, they couldn't be. They weren't going to beat the Bulls. They weren't going to beat the Lakers. They weren't going to beat the Celtics. They weren't going to beat, you know, the
they
historic
beat the Celtics that series.
Well, I mean, but in general, I mean, the Pistons.
That was a damn good.
You throw the Pistons or even the Cleveland Cavaliers back then. I mean, those teams that were consistently going to playoffs that they were having to play that they weren't going to be better than.
But you know what what Shin did, and this was, and Shin will probably say it was like his worst mistake. Well, I mean, other than
the one that got him back.
You're right. Things like that. But the thing with Mourning is, I remember watching a lot of games that year and thinking, this guy is really special.
Yeah,
he's one of those guys that would be LaMelo Ball would be like if he could stay healthy, if he could actually play occasionally.
Yeah.
But he was one of those, you sat there, he was just so good defensively, and he was just. He really, he was 6'9", but he was like he was 7'1".
Yeah.
It was just, and when I remember that day they let him go, I thought, oh my.
Who did we get that trade? Eddie Jones, Glenn.
We got
Rice. I mean, there were some good players coming. But I remember somebody telling me from the team, so, we have something special here, but Kendall wants to leave in some ways, and Larry wants to leave in some ways, and Zoe wants to leave in some ways.
Yeah.
Just because they all wanted to be the guy, and there was conflicts. I think with Zoe and Larry, it stemmed over about a woman, I think.
Oh, really?
Might have been the catalyst. And
those damn women.
Always causing trouble. Together, but this was some of the people really wanted to keep them together because they knew they had something special. Yeah. And boy, it hasn't been special for so long. You're right. When Kemba was here, and the guy that never quite made it from Kentucky, took him second overall.
Right,
Gilchrist.
Yeah.
He was like a middle linebacker of a player. He had
great defensive player. Great defensive player.
Couldn't shoot. Could not shoot a jumper.
Why? He guarded himself. He guarded himself.
Michael Kidd Gilchrist. Yeah. It's a great name.
They played Miami. I remember going down there for that. I remember thinking how accessible Zoe was, and accessible Wade was, and accessible Bosch was. So I used to write it down there. I said, why are they so damn nice? He said, Pat Riley. He said, Riley says, look, you guys can give the media a little bit of time. You can be courteous. It's good for us. It's good for them. Just do it.
Yep.
And they did. And they were fun to be around. And obviously the Hornets weren't going to win that series, but it was so damn intense. And it was, you're right. I mean, NBA basketball, but so is the NFL. I mean, when you guys play a playoff game up here, it's been a while. But it's been a while. It's a big damn deal.
Well, I mean, two of my favorite sports moments in Charlotte ever was the Lonzo game, and then the game where the Panthers beat the Cowboys.
Yes.
And, I mean, that stadium was rocking that day. And then also the game when Chad Cota had the interception.
The Steelers.
Against the Steelers.
Well, that was the same
to win the division. Right?
That was the same year, to clinch home field advantage and give us not home field advantage. It was to clinch the first round bye to win the division. And he intercepted that after Cordell had the longest run for a quarterback at the time in NFL history, 91 yards. Yeah. He had Kevin Green, Lamar.
Back,
he had Kevin Green, Lamar Lathan on that team, Salt and Pepper. The city was absolutely electric, and that was our second year here. First year we were in Clemson, having to drive 4 hours to get there and back.
How was that for you guys driving to Clemson that first year?
Well, see, I was covering colleges.
Oh, that's true.
You had to ask him.
Yeah.
It turned out pathetic because at the end, South Carolina was doing a bunch of road work. And so I'm coming back from the Clemson game. It's like day two. And it was just, I thought, why would you do this now?
Yeah.
When you have a stadium full of people driving back to Charlotte, they're all going to hate South Carolina. It's going to affect your tourism. People aren't going to go to Greenville on vacation anymore. It's your fault.
That's true. By the way, we have people around there.
Yeah. Have you driven to Greenville? It's the damn same.
This construction's horrible. Orange barrels forever. They live forever.
It's horrible. It's horrible. So let's transition to Panthers for a second. So obviously Frank was part of a lot of big games there.
I was on the inaugural team where, like I said, Tom was in there quite a bit, along with, some other guys, Darren, Steve Reed was another guy that was, was a good guy. Yarbs would come in there. I remember Yarbs been in there.
Joe Menzer.
Charles Chandler.
Yeah, Charles Chandler.
Charles was the first beat writer for the Panthers, right?
Yeah, he was, and he was one of those guys that you either loved or you hated. And he wrote some stories that I'm not sure if he regrets or not, but we had a lot of stories in those first 4 or 5, 6 years with what was going on with the Panthers, from Kerry Collins, to Ray Caruth, to Fred Lane.
Oh my gosh, Fred Lane.
There's some stories that, to beating the Cowboys, to being the fastest team in NFL history, to win the most amount of games. That second year had the best win percentage.
You taking on the entire Raiders bench.
Yeah,
literally, we told this the last podcast. That's why I hired Frank, was because I was at that game, and Pac-Man and I had been trying to find a player that would come in there and not just give the same answers.
Yeah.
And so I needed somebody that said, I'm at the game, and this 65 Garcia guy. And I'll tell you a funny story. The front page of the sports page, or the front of the sports page the next day, it said like the mean Mexican or something like that, but you never would do that. It never would make it.
Do that now. You got no shot.
But I saw that, and I'm like, this is my guy. And so I called the Panthers, got Frank's agent, and then Frank came over, like the next week or whatever, and then he worked there ever since. But that fight was the reason why we got Frank on the air, because I was like, we need a guy like that. We don't need these guys that come in there and go, yes, or
now it'll be the perturbed Mexican American.
Is he here legally? In subtitles.
Frank would be the first person to get deported in the middle of a football game. But yeah, those early years of the Panthers had a lot of. It's pretty, like, as a columnist or as a writer, that first Panther team had some like big time names when you look back in history of football, from Kevin Green those first few years, and Sam Mills.
Sam Mills, absolutely.
Some of the veterans that they had brought in at the time, and that's why they were good as quick.
Bill Polian did a great job, and you guys can talk about the Jerry Richardson situation and how that came to fruition, and what ended up happening with him and the team. I'd love to hear your guys' perspective on that as well. Maybe in a little bit down the road, but those first couple of years, there was really nothing going on. The Hornets was one, and they rolled out the red carpet for us like celebrities in this town, because there really wasn't much to do here. It was either there was NASCAR, which Jeff Gordon at the time was dominating, right here in our backyard, and the Charlotte Motor Speedway.
Don't underestimate wrestling, baby.
Yeah,
Tom
wrestling. I remember it, wrestling, going to the old Coliseum, and Ric Flair. But all those guys coming to South End Brewery, back in the day, and I'm sure I've seen you guys there a couple of times as well. But I remember Kevin Green and Ric Flair getting up on tables right after games, lines around the corner, and we had a nice little following there that would come, and they'd be up on the table, doing their song and dance and playing off each other. It was phenomenal. But some of the biggest names in sports were coming through that area at the time. Andre the Giant was through there. Hulk Hogan came through there.
Wrestlers through. Tom, you were close with a lot of, and Rick and I were good buddies, for quite a while, and we still keep in touch. And
Tom wrote a great column about Andre the Giant. Tell him your Andre the Giant story.
Trying to remember it.
When he died, remember you went up?
They invited me to his funeral.
Yeah,
and it was in the middle of nowhere, and
it's in North Carolina, though, right?
North Carolina, and he was a French Canadian. He had he's French. He had a guy named Frenchie running his farm for him, and I remember going up there, and it was really cool to see him. And there's Hulk, there's Rick, there's all these guys that have been
Arn Anderson,
Arn Anderson, and it was just really well done. You could tell how much people liked him. He was a really nice guy. But I'm thinking, all right, I got to get back to Charlotte and write. I got to get this in the paper. And they start to scatter his ashes. I'm going, damn,
that's a lot of ashes.
Handful. I'm not going to make deadline. Why did you do this deadline? Because the ashes were still in the air. What my fault?
That's funny.
That's what I remember. I laughed so hard when I read that.
Were you ever lucky enough to have a beer with Andre the Giant? I know you did with Rick and a lot of the other guys.
You couldn't just have a beer with.
Well, that's what I was going to ask. Is if you did, I'd be curious to hear how many he drank.
Now, Rick would tell me about it. Rick and I still talk.
Yeah.
The cool thing about Flair is I always try to buy at least my share.
Mm-hmm.
He would never let you buy. I mean, Flair would like flash some signal to the bartender.
Yeah.
And you would never buy. He would tell me about Andre, how much he could drink, and it was amazing. But
Yeah.
Well, he did the Guinness Book of Records. 125 beers in one evening.
Yeah.
12-ounce beers.
Now,
125.
Whoa.
No, it's absolutely the truth. It's the
I
truth.
saw a story on it.
It's the
Are
truth.
you talking about Flair? Or are you talking about Andre the Giant?
He's Flair 40 or 50. He's done.
Flair was more of a wine guy.
Yeah. He became more of a wine guy for sure.
When you would see Andre the Giant hold a beer, you couldn't see the beer. Like to him, it had to be like a thimble of beer.
Yeah. You know,
like,
just like,
yeah, I mean, he was just throwing back. And he also, they said, would order cases of like champagne and stuff and drink the whole damn case. Like the stories of him are just legendary.
it's legendary. It's amazing. You know, I think back to my little self, and I could never put away more than 19 or 20 at one time.
You're pretty good.
Yeah.
Well, that's the truth. I mean, you hear this. I mean, he was a giant.
He was a
He was
giant.
truly a giant.
Yeah.
You shook his hand, and I have pretty big hands for a guy my size. I mean, he would engulf him.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was like 3 hands, and it was like, oh my God, this is not normal. This guy is not human. What planet are you from? And then, you had the speech impediment a little bit where he kind of just, talked a little slower.
Nobody gave him crap about.
Yeah.
Right. Nobody in school gave him shit about that. I promise you that.
Shit about anything.
Like 6 kids a day hanging from a tree. They're going to give him hell about it the way he talked.
But I mean, all that kind of intertwined, right? I mean, the wrestling and the football, the team coming here. Yeah, but you covered, Kerry, obviously, when he was here in our first season, our second season, then our third season, and then that whole thing kind of went to hell in a handbasket. And you've covered, Fred Lane, you've covered Ray Caruth. What is the craziest story you could tell or you have, with the Panthers that, just kind of brings back those memories of, that just it was like it was yesterday almost.
Well, for a while, it was just, I remember people were writing, what's wrong with Charlotte? But it was, if Ray Caruth had played in Indianapolis, would he have been any different?
Right.
I remember covering his trial one day, and there were 2 good-looking women in there, and they're both like, because they wanted Ray to be their guy. A preacher would come in and pray, and if you listen to the preacher, Ray was not guilty, whereas it was evident Ray was guilty as hell.
Guilty as hell, yeah.
But I think of one that had nothing to do with any of that. It's just went to the Super Bowl, and Rucker was on the team, and he's a guy I really like.
Yeah.
And I went to him and I said, all right, who is a bigger deal in Charlotte? Your quarterback, Jake Delhomme, or Ric Flair? And Rucker says, Tom, are you crazy? Flair. And I just thought that's a cool thing for a football player to do. Here they're the penultimate game, and it's Flair. And Flair, you walked into a bar with Flair, and man, it was just, people would go nuts.
Yeah, he like I said, there was a long run where he and I would hang out a bunch, and I mean, we would go like these celebrity judges at like bikini contests and shit. He picked me up in a limo, and and it was when I started dating my wife Krista. We were at Cowfish one night, and this was when Rick
was one of those places.
Yeah, and so there was a place next to Cowfish called M6 or something like that. Now it's that Beulah or whatever it's called, but so we're sitting in Cowfish, and it's my wife. We weren't married yet, and her parents. It was the first time I went to dinner with her parents, and we're talking. I'm nervous as shit anyway, and I'm throwing down as many bourbons as I can, try to relax. And I see Rick walk in to the bar. We're sitting over to the side, and he sees me, and he comes over the table. Suit, what's up? And we start talking, and I introduce him to Krista's parent, mom and dad. And the one thing about wrestlers, and you guys know this, I mean, they all are so polite and like they really do get.
There's not one person
kindly.
There is not one. That was you're right. I'm glad you brought that up, because you see these athletes now, and I was one of these guys that wasn't the status of these guys today.
You were always accessible.
Yeah, but I tried to be, and a guy like Flair.
Especially for an illegal.
Hey, you realize those guys are going to be waiting out there.
I know, right?
Guys in the suits will be out
Yeah, we
there.
got a surprise at the end of the podcast.
But if I saw him at a Hornets game, and somebody came up and asked him for an autograph, he would take the time out to treat you like you were his best friend.
Yeah.
And that was the one thing about Flair that
it
I
was
was always respect. I learned a lot, but I learned a lot from him.
I've never met a wrestler that wasn't like that. And we had a bunch of them on the air over the years, but he came over and he talked to me and Kristen and her parents. And then after dinner, we went over to M6 with him and had some drinks. And it made me look like the shit, like he built me up. And it just, when he walked away, I'm thinking, dude, I owe that dude something. Like he just hooked me up, and every wrestler that I dealt with, I remember Roddy Piper, even, who was such a heel on the
show. Yeah.
But we'd have him to the studio and he was just not, we had John Cena, you name them. And they were it must be something that they go through. I'm serious in their training.
No, I agree.
That you treat people kindly.
Well, they realized the fans were there, and without the fans, they weren't there.
But that's any sport, not all of athletes. You can say
well,
that.
Charlotte used to be wrestling. It was wrestling and motorsports. When I moved
Charlotte and Atlanta were the two hubs for that. Yeah.
And the Crockett family and DJ you would remember that from way back in the day.
I used to go to Crockett.
And they had the Russians. You remember the Russian comrade?
Yeah.
But they had all these guys, and I was covering the Charlotte O's back then, the baseball team. And I'd go out to the ball game, and there'd be this great big guy sitting in the press box. And he's like, "Hi, how you doing?" And he would be a wrestler. And back in the day, it was not as subtle and intricate as it is today. And I'd look at his forehead, and he had all these little marks. Remember that? All the little marks on the forehead? Because they would take razor blades in their hands, and they would cut their forehead so they would bleed.
That's right.
Because it was part of the show.
As they got hit with a steel chair.
Yeah. You gotta believe it.
Yeah, that's right.
They were great guys.
Yeah.
And you sit there and they'd watch the game and they'd say, they'd be going, this is so neat to be it's a AA baseball game. It's so neat you're up in the press box.
Well, that kind of goes back to my Flair story that I was going to share, is that I was at Del Frisco's one night, same type of thing, walking up there, and he's there with beautiful young lady, and sitting there talking, and he's probably mid 50s, maybe early 60s now, and had just kind of made his comeback. And I go, and he's sitting down eating dinner with his wife, and I go up to him, and yeah. And
I said maybe.
I wasn't.
Well, that's what I was saying. Yes, sir.
I didn't want to incriminate, so I didn't ask. But I said, Rick, what happened to your head? And this is when, I don't know if you remember, he got hit with that chair, and his blonde hair was bleeding everywhere. It was during his comeback, like his third or fourth comeback.
Yeah.
And he had staples all the way down. I said, buddy, you're too old to be having those staples like that. Come on. He goes, that's what happens. You've been married 4 times. You're still playing alimony.
They had a wrestling school in a really nondescript building outside of Atlanta. And I found out about it. I said, look, I can come and write a story, but I'd rather go through it. And I said, I want no favors. Just pretend I'm another wrestler trying out.
How old were you when you did this?
Too old. Probably I was in my 50s.
Oh, jeez.
And but I'm running a lot. I figure I'm in shape, and I go there, and the guy's interviewing me. So what's your background? I said, I run a lot. I'm a friend of Flair's. I said, I had 4 younger brothers, so yeah. He said, well, do you have a name? I said, well, I'll tell you, man, for my finishing hold, the Deadline. He goes, oh, good. Compliment of the day. Then they go out there, and he said, why don't you go up against? First they had me run in the parking lot. You do squats. I wasn't doing squats, and that drains the hell out of your legs. And I went from being the fast guy to being like the slowest guy. There'd be like 300-pound guys blowing by me. And then we're starting to kind of wrestle. And I'm going up against a guy, a Russian from like Alabama. And because the Russians were not, you could tell they were Russians because they weren't tan. Everybody else was tan. And this guy's going at me, and I'm thinking, man, but I didn't want to change it. It was a better story if I didn't ask for any breaks.
Yeah.
And so I'm doing it. And my wife's there with me, and she's watching, and she's thinking, God, he's going to crap beat out of him.
Yeah.
And then they had me wrestle one of the smaller guys. He's still a wrestler. He beat me. And then he said, okay, we're going to change everything up. I want everybody to climb to the top rope and jump. And we're going to try different falls, and we're going to do some flips and stuff. And Sharon, wife, walks up. He is not doing that. Do it just because I wanted to go through it, but I'd still be laying there.
Oh my God.
So that was the end of it. And when I went to my car, I remember you could have like put me in a travel bag because there was no musculature, there was no control over anything. It was just like dragging dirty clothes out to your car, and I laid in the back seat.
So you sleep the whole way home.
Green. God, it was a good story.
It made a great column.
Let me ask you this, something just kind of off topic, but we talk about deadlines and editors editing your story and all that stuff. And obviously the paper business now is totally different than it was when you guys were doing it and when we were working together. But how much does technology now make a writer's job so much easier? Because now you don't have to worry about getting back to the office or turning in a story. Now it's all on your computer, and with everything you've got there, does it just make the job a lot easier because you don't have to spend as much time on the shit like getting back to the office or picking up actual phone and dialing numbers and
Pony Express bringing it there.
Get me rewrite.
Exactly.
Well, one of the things that really was bothering me towards the end of my stint there was you had to do these little blog posts during games. You had to do social media feeds during games. All the stuff was going along. You want to be paying attention to the game and picking up little things. And I felt like you didn't see the game as well if you're doing all these little things to kind of keep people posted.
Yeah.
Although when Twitter started and the Panthers were playing Arizona in their one playoff game where DeLone was intercepted 6 times.
I was at that damn game.
2008.
I was doing Twitter for us, and that's all I had to do. So I had the best time, man. I was saying, look at Larry Fitzgerald. If he cut that hair, he'd be 0.2 of a second faster. I mean, because I just said, do what you want.
Yeah.
Write the tweet.
Are you on Twitter anymore?
I'm on there occasionally.
I haven't really seen it. Like during baseball, man, I have to come after your ass.
Come at me and give me some crap, okay? You and your Mets.
Yeah, I'm going to come at you.
Another area where it changed is I liked underdogs.
Yeah.
I'd go to Spartanburg. I want to write about the guys. Yeah, I'll write about Cam. I write about those guys. But I like writing about the guys on the edge of the roster. They're trying to make it. They are working hard.
Yeah.
And there's just some good stories. I remember seeing a guy from SC State make this diving catch. And I said, who was that guy? His name was Hemingway. I went, yeah. And so I asked him about Hemingway. He said, oh, yeah. He said, you're looking for the old man in the sea. You're looking for that shell. You're looking for that pearl. Panthers are my pearl. I thought, oh, man.
Oh, wow.
But when people started to read the paper on their phones, they wanted to get to it.
Yeah.
They didn't want to read, like, I wrote about a guy from Johnson C. Smith, a receiver, really good for that level, but not necessarily NFL. And then a bunch of Panther receivers got hurt, and they called him back. He didn't have a car. He had a bike. So I wrote about him riding his bike past the car that Peppers drove, past that 57 Chev that Johnson drove past. And Rivera loved that guy, and he liked those kind of stories. But not readers. Readers want to know, all right, he drove past this mail truck looking that Peppers has. Tell us about Peppers.
Yeah.
And so more and more stories about underdogs were kind of, you can still write them, but people want to read about the stars. If you're picking up your phone, you don't want to read a long story about some guy named Hemingway necessarily. You want to read about Cam and I got tired of writing about
Yeah. I like to fill in the background because Tom tells these things and I love the things he tells. But he just tells them perfectly. Now we were in Spartanburg, but this is the kind of the color. I like to add the color to the story. He gives the nuts and bolts and everything.
Thanks.
But we're in Spartanburg and we're finishing off an evening and we go to this biker's bar and it is just a dive. It's one of those places you walk in and you want somebody like Garcia with you, So okay, this is our friend over here. In case you have a problem.
Yeah.
So we go in and we're sitting there. We got this whole long bar sitting there, and I go in and order a beer. It's probably a Budweiser or something because I'm not sure they had anything else in the biker bar at this time. And Tom comes up, just this lady's back behind there, and he says, could I have a Chardonnay, please? Exactly like that.
Oh my God.
And she looks at him like he's crazy.
Oh.
And then she goes,
how she looked.
That's the bar down the street, the Blue Oyster.
and so she looks, and she looks around. She says, I got one, but I think this is 2 years old.
I asked her, I said, she said, I've never served one of those before. I said, how many work tickets? She said, 3.5 years.
Right, I forgot that part, man.
Yeah.
All right, I'm going to tell you one of my favorite stories from Panthers camp.
Tell me.
There's so many great stories from Panthers
Oh, I
camp.
bet.
But you guys remember the thing when Chris Jenkins was coming down the hill in the cart and hit the guy that was Gene Brown. Hit Gene Brown. Remember Gene?
I do remember Gene.
Nailed him,
Great guy.
knocked him flat, knocked him down there. And, so that's bad. I was a rookie covering the Panthers at that time. I was with Pat Yasenskas, Yasenskas goes, we need to know what Chris thought about, when that happened. I mean, Chris was, he was leaning over him and he was like, making sure he was okay. And Jim was okay, but he had just been going out of control on that little thing and he didn't even see him. And so Pat goes, the rookies, none of the rest of us are going to ask Jenkins about that. And Ed Reed, Darren, and then they're all standing or nodding and says, the rookie in the group's got to go ask him about that. So I'm going, well, yeah, I guess that makes sense. And so I go over to Chris and I go, and I had a good relationship with Chris. I said, oh, we'll be fine. I go over and talk to him, and I go over and talk. And I go up and say, Chris, can you kind of fill me in on what happened with the golf cart before practice? And he looks at me with this scowl and he goes, F, extending the F a little bit.
Wow.
Says, F, you get out of my face. And I went,
no way.
And I almost said, yes, sir. But I said, okay.
Smart.
and those guys, this is the worst part. Gant and all those guys, Menzer, they're laughing so hard.
They set you up.
Yeah, they set him up.
They said, what the hell do you think he's going to say? I thought it was my job.
Well, we're so old now that Chris Jenkins' son's playing in the NFL. How crazy is that? And he's
right.
good, like.
It really is amazing when you think about it.
It's funny you bring up Pat Yasenskas and over the years, so when we started WFNZ in 97 and we started bringing the co-host in, the Observer was where we would get the majority of them, because I'd have some ex-players and Jim Solanias of the world and Tim Hansons and like that. But the Observer is where we got them. And there were certain guys and I don't remember the rhyme or reason of why I used who I used when I would call you guys, but there was guys at the Observer that we used and those guys we didn't use. We used Charles Chandler and Tom and Stan, but
John DeLong. Yep.
Well, John was with the Salem Journal, but we didn't use Pat Yasenskas and we didn't use Scott Fowler and we didn't use some of those guys. And there was no reason about it. I don't remember if maybe
you guys had kind of a full roster of
maybe we just
guys
didn't need as many guys.
I really think that's right.
Because guy and a Hornet guy, and then Tom was a comment on everything. And
Fowler asked me one time about that, and I think I mentioned it. I think even to Kellogg at that time. He said we got enough newspaper guys.
Yeah, that might have been what it was. But I just always remember there were certain guys that there was no reason behind it. Now over the years,
the reason behind it was who Pack liked.
Well, there was that too.
That guy,
and I would say that I'd say there were two things. It was who Pack liked, and it was the fact that Tom and I were really damn good.
Well, I will say this: they did have to be good. I mean, some newspaper guys are just boring, just like some TV guys won't ever say one thing that's going to make anybody, Yeah. And so you did have to kind of find the guys that would come on there and actually talk and laugh at themselves and be willing to get the shit kicked out of them on the wire line and all these things and then there was bad blood there was no bad blood with the guys we didn't use, but then there became some bad blood with the guys we did use because there became, especially those first few years when we started beating Jerry Valancourt when he was at WBT with his big signal and we had little signal, and when we started beating him and we started really kind of getting a buzz around FNZ and Charlotte, our ratings were the best they'd ever been, and Pac-Man's become kind of blossoming into like this star in Charlotte that we had not had in sports radio, and then Gary in the morning show, and everything was just building. We would feel, and certain people at the station more than others, but I definitely did feel it too. But we would feel sometimes they would write a story and FNZ would get left out, or they would write a story about this and we had the guy on that before anybody and they wouldn't say that. And so,
like when Kerry Collins came on and talked about,
that's a good example of it. But what would happen is the Observer guys that did work for us would have to sit in the studio for 5 hours listening to me,
Packer,
and they were stuck in a rock and a hard place because they're buddies with these dudes, and then me and Pack want to shit all over them, and Langston Works is a great example because Langston's a great dude. I went to West Charlotte with Lori. So, Langston's a really good dude. And at the time, he was the TV radio writer. And I don't even remember what started all of it. But, boy, we got into it. It became a pissing match between Langston and FNZ.
I remember that.
Yeah. And I think some of it was definitely deserved. And then, obviously, when those things start, then it just becomes, a pissing match and who gets the last punch in, basically. But because of some of those, we called a meeting between me, Pac-Man. I think we may have been the only two from FNZ that were in there. I don't think Kellogg was still there. Maybe he was. Maybe
I don't think so.
I don't think so. I think it was Pac-Man and I were the two from FNZ. And then it was Stan and Tom and I think Charles Chandler and Gary Schwab, who was the editor, or the sports editor. Yeah, right.
Yeah,
he was their boss, basically. And Gary was a super good dude. And so we're having this meeting, and we had it upstairs when our radio station was at 4th Street. And I'm young. I had no kids. I think I was married. I was probably 26 or something. So I'm, already probably thinking I'm in over my head. And I know Pac-Man is going to not.
Well, he's pretty young at that time too.
Oh, Pac-Man. But Pac also, I knew, was not going to walk in this meeting and back down or even worry about hurting feelings, and I was going to try to keep it nice and, let everybody get out what they got to
try to play mediator,
fix it.
Yeah.
Well, we're in there and Pac's not in there yet. And we're waiting and I'm thinking, what the hell's he doing? And he comes walking in and he's got a freaking baseball bat in his hand and he just slapped it against his hand as he walks in.
I still remember that.
And I'm going, right when he does, I go, Jesus Christ. and he's not smiling. He's not like
But you know what? I almost laughed because I knew what he was doing.
And that's the thing. I think you guys probably knew, but Gary had
no idea.
And Gary somebody had sent him like a death threat, literally, for what they'd said against FNZ, something crazy like that, and I remember Gary reading that to us, and I'm thinking in my head, who the freak would write a death threat to somebody over this? Like, geez, and it
signed Mark Packer.
Mark Packer. But yeah, so he's reading this letter, and anyway, we had this, and it was like, it was tense, and everybody kind of got out what they wanted, and you guys were kind of like me. We were trying to just move it along. Yeah, let's move it along. Pac was in there, throwing fireballs, and Gary's having it to anyway. And I don't think we rectified anything after that. If I'm not mistaken, you guys didn't work for a little while. Didn't
That's right. We were off for a number of months. You remember?
Yeah,
I know there was nobody from the Observer, and it it could have been as long as 11 months.
It was a while.
I don't think it was that long.
I remember QCB on there talking about, we don't have Olson and Comb over in here anymore.
Well, I tell you, the thing that sucked about it was back in the good days was when Primetime had two co-hosts.
Yes, and that was tremendous.
And back then I was the producer, so I would book the co-hosts. Well, when we lost the Observer guys, it was hard finding guys, I'm trying to get anybody to come co-host. So that hurt.
That's why he called me. I'm anybody.
Yeah. Your timing with that flight was perfect. No, but it was tough to get, co-hosts back in there because, the Observer guys were all really good co-hosts. And so finally, I don't even remember how we fixed it. I don't remember what was done or said or who. I don't even remember who fixed it, but I do remember we finally were able to bring you guys back. And
just think of some of the co-hosts you've had in there, though.
We started with Dino Hackett and Ethan were our Monday, Friday football guys.
Oh yeah.
I used to do bits where I would move fun to Dino, and then I'd have to stand. Come on, Dino. Let's go get a beer. Get Tom Shortberry. But we would Dino and Ethan were our football guys, and then on Tuesday was our football day, I believe. So that would have been when we would
Blitz brothers. I remember that because that was when it was Menzer and Charles.
Yeah. So we had footballs on Tuesday, and then Wednesday was kind of we'd bring in basketball or something, and then Thursday was
Cheminsky would come in.
Yeah, whoever. It was kind of like Stan or Tom, like anybody that could talk anything on Wednesday, and then Thursday was similar. But on Thursday, I remember we especially with Pac-Man, we would start kind of building up college, and I don't even think they played Thursday night football back then, but Thursdays you're kind of getting fired up, and then Fridays was all college pro football and Dino and Ethan, and that was the first year or two, And then we started incorporating other, John DeLong and
well, he had guys like Marty Smith on there and
Marty Smith.
Marty's a great guy.
Yeah, we were
DeLong was good.
JD was great, and
he was.
I always liked JD.
Except when he'd fall asleep in the studio every now and then.
Well, yeah, I'd be like, JD, can you do the show Tuesday? Will. And he'd always open up with a will. And then he would say, Bubba's going to take the well out. Yes.
Bubba's was Thursday. I remember Bubba's every Thursday. Bubba's barbecue.
No, Bubba's was Friday.
It was Friday.
Oh, it was Friday. You're right. It was Fridays.
Yeah.
It was Fridays. It was Friday. Every Friday.
I know it was
Bubba's
Friday.
barbecue.
Everybody was sick of it.
Oh, yeah.
By the end,
Man, I tell you.
And
Those ribs were incredible.
take whatever's left home.
Yeah.
And I take like 3 boxes under each
When
arm.
I stopped, I'm coming off 2 back surgeries in the last like 45 days. And because I haven't been able to go to the gym and I've gained 10 pounds and I'm miserable. And so I get to go back Monday. I can't wait. When I stopped producing primetime, whatever year that was, 2002 or 3, whatever, when I started running the stations, the country stations and all that too, I lost like 15 pounds without doing anything. And it was because I wasn't eating all that food on primetime every day.
Oh, man.
Because literally every day was a spread. Like it wasn't like they just bring a bag of cheeseburgers. It was like a
Fried
spread.
chicken,
Because the
greasy burgers.
because the restaurants
And it was good.
And everything was so good.
and the restaurants that did it realized that we're going to talk about them for 4 hours. So we better give them something to talk about. Because if they did just throw some shit in there, Pac wouldn't talk about it. He'd be like, yeah, thanks to, DJ's Grill today. We appreciate it. And then that was it. That was it.
Yeah.
But if you knocked it out, like, I don't even remember if either one of you guys, who was this hosting the co-host with Pac when James Brown came in there?
Oh, I think it was Menzer and Charles. I think it was on Blitz Brothers. And I was listening to that. And that is the funniest show I believe I've ever heard. James Brown and Packer kept asking him questions and
And he was standing there. Like he was just eating. I don't think he ever sat down.
Yeah. And Packer said, is that good, James? And he'd go,
yeah. We used that as an opener, a winer opener or something for years. I remember.
Nancy and Howard going over to go to dinner with some friends of ours. And I kept almost swerving off the road because she says, "What's so hard at that?" And Packer was perfect with him on that.
Yeah, Pac was a trip, man. He to this day, I mean, he just understood he could just move so quickly into anything, and he, the thing about Pac-Man was Pac was intimidating. I mean, he was,
and you know what he needed? A co-host who I will not mention his name because we all like him. Told me one time when we were just walking out in the parking lot after Pac had been ranting about something in there, and he said, Packer's at his best when he has a target.
It's true.
It's true. It was exactly true.
And that's really, I think that's the you could say the same for most people who do well, like whether you have a goal or a target, whatever you want to call it. But Pac, man, when he would get
his target was typically MJ, Michael Jordan, Jerry Richardson, or anybody at the Observer.
Those two, yeah.
But it didn't last. I didn't think he could sustain it indefinitely. I wrote a column about him after he did his last show. He was worried because we had talked, but it was so good in the early days. At the end, it wasn't good, but. So I wrote about that. I wrote about Jimmy Carter.
Yeah.
Having Jimmy Carter on, that was amazing. And it was
that's just incredible.
And it was fun for a long time, man. It was fun.
It was. And the guys do a good job now. And I wish we would have had that signal, man. That would have been a whole different ball.
Oh, yeah.
Some of the guys.
Yeah.
There's 4 shows on there, and I really like 2 of them.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing too. Not everyone's ever going to like every show. And when we built our shows, that's kind of what the morning show, for instance, I knew Gary was going to be really, really liked and do very well with the business guys, like the CEOs and all that.
Kind of that button down.
He was a newspaper guy that had all the stats and all of my buddies in Ballantyne loved him.
Right. Yeah. And he was very good at pacing the show.
He was buttoned up.
And he would laugh. And so Gary was great. And then Pac did a really good job.
We had the afternoon show. Yeah, there was a couple of difference. I mean, Matt came in there, and then also
Penner.
Yeah, Penner. Yeah, Penner in the afternoon.
I forgot about that.
He lived right down the street from me.
Yeah.
Did you like him? Was he a good guy?
Briefly.
Well, let me tell you something. I like Penner, but Penner made a really big mistake. You're talking about getting Wally pipped. I'll use a baseball analogy for you.
Yeah.
Penner was doing the middays, and I needed a co-host for him, and I'm listening to all these tapes, and nothing's really ringing a bell. I didn't like any of them. And Penner goes, man, there's this guy named Chris McClain in Jacksonville who I've done some stuff with, and I think he's really good. So immediately when he tells me he thinks he's good, I'm thinking this guy's gonna be just like Sandy. Stats. But I listened to it, and it was Mac, and I liked it. So I brought him in. We did a couple shows, and I hired him with Penner. And I would have these meetings with those guys all the time where I would have to say, Sandy, stop just talking stats. Nobody gives a shit. They can go get the paper and read the box score, whatever the hell they need to do. And he just wouldn't buy into it. And Sandy was a funny dude too. Like Sandy's one of those guys too that had that laugh where he would just kind of like Tom, like he would start. Nothing really came out, you know.
Like Mr. Ed the way.
Well, yeah, that was a bad impersonation. But they would, Sandy would like just laugh, and you wouldn't really hear anything. And he was a smart ass in a good way. Sandy was a good dude. But anyway, he went out of town for like a week on vacation, and budget was always an issue at FNZ, so they didn't want me to spend money to bring everybody in. So I went to Mac and I said, hey man, can you do the show by yourself this week? He's like, yeah, that's fine. And he did the show by himself that week, and the show was great.
Yeah,
and I listened.
He is good.
And I loved it.
Oh yeah,
and so that turned into the Mac show pretty quick after that. And then obviously Mac took
during the afternoons.
Well, then they were middays. They were 12.
Yeah, middays at 12 to 3.
And then he went to mornings.
And then he went to mornings. He's speaking of no budget. That's when I came in.
I did it for free. The illegals were cheap. Right? Right now.
I had to wash dishes in order to work.
You did the lawn.
We gave Frank a 6-pack of Corona, and that was it.
Frank and some tacos.
Frank says, have to wait till after dark. I got to pick grapes in the afternoon.
I will tell you about the newspaper guys. And again, Tom, I'll exclude from this because Tom isn't like most of the other newspaper guys. Like, I don't mean this in a bad way, but you guys are going to agree with me, I think. If not, Stan, we could take it outside.
Come on, buddy.
Now, a lot of the newspaper guys were like, they couldn't wait for the free food. They couldn't wait to get to the Hornets games or the Panther games to scarf down the free buffet and say, Yarbrough was the same way, and he was a radio guy. So it's not just, And now that I think about it, and after your story, Stan, I see why Tom wasn't like that, because they never had freaking, just the wine and the fish.
Caviar.
That's the word I was trying to think of. Charcuterie. But the newspaper guys would come and literally it got to the point where guys would call me or text me, hey, what's the food today?
See, now I never did that.
And I'm not exactly. I'm talking a lot.
Are you serious?
Oh, I'm dead serious.
Can I defend myself for a minute?
Yeah.
Because I know Tom is like that. It's true. And what I thought when I came in was it was my job probably to promote whoever we had for the food.
Yep.
So I would say that.
No, you were always great with it.
And I wanted to do that and say that, but then it comes across as like, boy, he's another one of those glutton newspapers.
Free food.
Free food. And I played that up because that's part of the show.
And in all honesty, a lot of the radio guys are like that too. I mean, because you got these guys that cover games, and whether it be radio or whatever, I mean, they live at these arenas. I mean, they work their job and then they go to the games.
DJ, let me give you one thing.
Yeah.
One example.
Yep.
Racing riders. Racing riders you cannot be a racing rider unless you weigh 250 or more pounds. Frank, you could be a racing rider.
I think he's under that.
Comes close.
You know what? Now that I'm thinking of the racing riders that I know, I'm not going to say any names, but you're right, I think.
It's unbelievable. We'd go out the track. Tom shaking.
Right now,
he knows it's true.
The Speedway Club did have a hell of a buffet.
It's not only is it true, but you go to their houses and it's like it's furnished in early Speedway. Racing crap all over.
The hoods, the car,
yeah.
The freebies, man. The swag.
Well, listen, we did. I mean, that's one of the benefits of being in that business is all the free stuff.
Sure.
But, certain people, I'm not kidding though. I would get texts from certain guys asking, what's the food today?
That's when you gave them $50 per diem to come do the 4-hour show.
$50 for the whole show.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
They better eat.
Yeah, that's right.
If I'm not mistaken, when we first started doing co-hosts, I think it was $20 an hour is what we paid you, which that actually is good.
I mean, back
when
then.
I started, I was getting more than that. I mean,
goddamn it, I didn't want you to say that in front of That's been all these years, and now you just threw me under the bus.
I had to do it for free.
I'll tell you who I'll throw under the bus. My buddy Jaminsky, who I really like, is really a great guy. And I'd be co-hosting with him, and I was making like yeah, we'd do the 4-hour show, and I think it was like 35 an hour or something. So I'd get 140. And Juminski's check came to my house by mistake. It was stuck to my check. And I said, there's 2 things here. So I pulled it off. Juminski's gotten $300. And I'm going, and this is way back in the days, the 90s sometime. And I'm like, you know,
Juminski also played in the NBA for like 20 years. And
then I went,
But money on the side, whether it's FNZ, John Boy and Billy, I mean, it's just, it's cool because you know it's coming into your real job, and then it's just supplemental.
Yeah,
and that's the thing. I never cared.
And it was
about
fun. Like you guys came in and talked sports for 4 hours and had a good time and got fed well.
And it was good for us. It was good for
No doubt.
with the paper. Yeah.
It really was. I got to tell you, this
you guys definitely. I don't get to you.
Go ahead.
I don't want to cut you off, but the one thing I was going to say about what you just said was that it would be interesting before FNZ and then a year of you doing FNZ, probably how many more people knew who you were. You know, like it had to help when you would go to games or people that may not before have known who you were that now they're going, dude, there's Tom, there's Stan from the Observer that's on FNZ.
Well, I mean, not just the FNZ guys, myself in general. I mean, nobody knew me as a football player.
Yeah.
I wrote about you. What do you mean?
But I felt like, I became more recognizable as a host of a show and on WFNZ than I ever was as a Panther.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is what I found. I mean, we were up visiting some friends in Brevard a few years after I had started, and we're walking. We had dinner. We're walking down the street, and I'm just talking. I'm talking to them. The guy on the other side of the street yells, "Stan Olson!" And I went, "That's impossible," you know. And they're all laughing, like, "How can he possibly know you?" And then I went, bingo. He didn't know what I looked like. Probably
he recognized your voice.
Exactly. That was the whole
thing. He must have been for sure because our signal sure as hell. There's not a chance in hell he was listening to us in Brevard.
I had to drive you nuts.
Oh man, I'm gonna tell you something. I fought for years. I mean, every year I was at more than once a year, but when we would do budgets or when one of our FM stations, I remember K1047 had like a shitty year, 2 years or whatever, and the ratings were just bad. And I was beating the drum. Give me that signal.
I remember
Give me that signal. And I just told him, I'm like, look, if we have a signal where everyone can hear us, it's over. It's over. Because FNZ was the most expensive station to run out of anyone because we had so many people, right?
Yeah.
But we billed the least. And I always told him, give me an F. And I remember it probably was like 2012
if
or 13.
People only knew the amount of time that he spent saving people's jobs, number one. Number two, fighting for us to get to get an FM signal, because not only was he my boss, he's also one of my best friends.
Yeah,
and we've done everything together. So I got both sides. I get to
shower with that guy.
Hands flipping down. He was there.
I wasn't there for that. God,
but I had to hear this double-sided, right? Yeah. So he would talk to me as a friend. We'd kind of vent and talk about the things that we could do better and what if and imagine if and things like that. But then when he actually got to the work, he had to fight for us to save our jobs because they're always trying to take our jobs.
And they're always trying to cut our hourly wage and stuff.
One co-host. You can't have that. It's too expensive. It's too expensive. It was the most expensive station at the radio to run.
Hey, and tell me this, DJ, why would they not just switch us to 104.7? What was the deal?
They were scared because even though 104.7 ratings sucked, they still were making more money than FNZ because we cost so much. So, FM radio station, even back then, you might pay the morning guy, maybe, I don't even remember who the morning show was. Let's just say 100, 150. Maybe you pay the midday 50, 60, afternoon drive, maybe 70, 80. Yeah. And that's it really, whereas us, we had 3-4 dudes on every show.
Yeah.
Plus we had so sure. It was expensive, and I think it was 2012 or 13. I had a conference call that I finally got in front of, I think it was
right before we sold to Beasley.
Yeah, it was somewhere in there, but it might have been a couple years before. Like I think Mel Carmazon was on the call, and then I forget who the other guy was. But they finally let me. I felt like I had a chance, and after the call, one of them emailed me and just said, "Great call, you've got the plane on the runway." So I'm thinking,
you're thinking we're good.
We might have this,
yeah.
And a couple weeks go by,
then reality hit.
Yeah, I don't know whatever happened to that plane. But it never took off. I could tell you that. And now, but now they've got an FM and they're killing it, and it's great, But running FNZ, I'll tell you the hardest day I had in radio ever.
I know what you're going to say.
Which one?
Firing Backer.
Well, you know,
that wasn't the hardest.
Well, that's an interesting story because it wasn't that we fired. Yeah, well,
Packer fired himself.
Yeah, but it wasn't mutual. He did not want to leave.
Well, he didn't let the right people know that. You know, I mean, that was the whole part about that.
You're right about
and not. I mean, look, when you're
a part of all those negotiations on the side, seriously, and because Packer's a good friend. Packer's a good friend of mine too. So I'm kind of playing devil's advocate to both sides, and you need Pack. He's the guy. He's the station. Without him, he's our brand. We can't pay him this because we don't have any money. Everybody's taking pay cuts, and the days of making $300,000 are.
See, that's exactly right.
And look, Pack had side stuff. He was doing a lot. Southern Fried Football and all these things, and the thing about Pack was his contract was coming up, right? So. Right. He's not going to just come in there and say, I want to stay. I mean, it's a negotiation. He wants more money, and we're trying to save money.
And he wanted you guys to talk to his agent.
Well, we did talk to him.
Yeah, I mean, he was the only one that had an agent, I believe.
Yeah, no, we did talk. His name was Craig Fenich, I believe. He actually represented Major League Baseball players. I think Pack was the only broadcast guy that he was the agent for.
You know what I really didn't like about that whole thing? You never talked to my agent.
Well, you should have had him call me.
He was over there drinking Chardonnay.
That's right. Yeah. The Pack thing, honestly, I've never told this story. I mean, I've told this to Pack because Pack and I, when he left, he blamed me in a lot of ways for it, and it bothered me. Like normally, I never liked anybody getting fired anyway, and Pack didn't get fired. Like I said, it was more of a
because the contract was over.
Yeah, but we, when we had the last call with his agent, it was Bill Shanning and myself. And we've got him on speakerphone, and we're sitting there telling him exactly where we're standing and why, and his agent didn't want to hear it, and his agent just slams the phone, hangs up on us.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and that pissed my boss off a lot.
I get it.
And so, and I'm in the middle because again, Pack and I were tight. Hell, for 5 or 6 years, maybe longer, Pack and I talked every night after working with each other all day. I mean, we were always communicating, and when this went down, I walked out of that office and I went back to my office, and my phone rang within 5 minutes, and it was the head of programming for CBS, and he said, "Find a replacement." And I went,
"Oh my God.
I went, what are you talking about?" And he goes, "Find a replacement. We're not playing this shit."
Mm-hmm.
And so I went, "Well, I mean, we're still early on. Like we could work." So this true story. He goes, "Find a replacement and do not mention this to anybody."
Wow.
So I go to Pack. I don't remember if it was that day or the next day, but I went, or maybe it was that night on the phone. I don't remember, but I remember telling Pack, "Dude, they're not fucking around. Like I know that because Pack was also saying that he had other opportunities. He was flipping BT. I mean, what anyone
he was selling himself.
Yeah,
negotiating.
What anybody does when you're negotiating.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
And so, so we didn't know if he had another job or whatever, but I went to him and I said, "Look, dude, they're not messing around. Like they want me to go find a replacement now. So if you really do want to stay here, call your agent and let's figure it out. But like, if that's the end of the negotiation, him hanging up on us, it's over. They're not coming back." And so, literally, and I told him that they told me to go find a replacement, and so I did. I started looking around, and I found Taylor Zarza. But even to the very end, and it's funny, which worked out great, and
it really did.
But even to the very end, Pac-Man would come. We'd be on the air at 3. We'd always have like a pre-show at 2 or 2:30, and Pac would get to work at like 10. And he'd go in there and most prepared host I've ever seen in my life, but he'd also come in and he would, he'd walk down the sales pit and give him shit or, "Hey, you didn't sell anything in 3 months, or whatever, just give him hell." And then he'd come in my office and we'd talk about a game, whatever, or a lot of times he and I would bitch about, our boss or whatever it was. But once that happened and I told Pac that, and Pac was very, he said, "Well, I don't know." He didn't really say much about it. Like I felt when I got off the phone or whatever it was, I felt like Pac had it under control and it would get fixed. But then he started coming into work like at 2 and just doing the show at 3. So then he wasn't even there often. And so long story short, like there was really no communication between the two sides towards the very end. And I thought for sure it was going to be fixed. But then when it happened, I talked to Pac that night and he said, "Man, I would have come back. Like we could have figured this out." And I was like, "Pac, we tried. I mean, I told you that like a month ago, and Pac may remember some things differently than I do, or he may have had other conversations.
He said a lot of the similar stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty. I think that's.
He said he told me. He said, I wanted to come back.
It just never was really communicated.
Yes.
And so then when he was going to leave, they were going to cut. When you let somebody go, or when somebody leaves them on their own, whatever, they cut your email at a certain time and all that stuff. So it just so happened that Pac's last show was going to be at the Doghouse, and he was doing a Southern Fried Football show there that day too. I think the next day was like a bowl game or something, and his email was going to get cut, I think, before the show, and they didn't want him to do that last show, knowing that it was his last show, because they were worried that he'd go on there and just shit on everybody.
Right.
And so I talked to Pac, and I knew he wasn't going to do that for two reasons. Number one, I just didn't think Pac would do that. Number two, he had Southern Fried Football there that day, so he didn't want to jeopardize that. So basically,
this was at the Doghouse.
Yeah. So I went and asked if he could do Southern Fried Football there still, and could we do the show? And he's not going to say anything bad. Don't cut his email off, or whatever. And we did it, and Pac didn't. I mean, it was a great show. But then I think Pac got home, and I think they cut his email off like right after the show, and he called me or whatever. My email's cut off. But even after Pac left, I thought he would come back at some point, and it's funny. And I told this story on the last podcast, but when I was trying to find Pac's replacement, my first phone call was to Gary Williams, because he had been at Satellite and whatever. And I'd heard that maybe he wasn't as happy. And so I called Gary, we have a conversation, and Gary's basically, he's like, dude, yes, I'm in. However, I did this audition last week at the Golf Channel, and if I get it, obviously I'm going to take that. But if I don't, then yeah, let's figure it out. But he got the great for him.
How'd you find Taylor?
Taylor was doing sports radio in Raleigh, and so I'd heard his show when I was in Raleigh, and then he would come on with Pac every once in a while.
Yeah,
and so he was on the station some, and I always just thought that he reminded me of Gary, like. He wasn't going to be great with a whiner line ever. That wasn't his thing. And he wasn't going to be the guy that was going to come in there and just rip the shit out of somebody. That wasn't his thing. But he ran the show great. He was always prepared.
Very professional.
Did great interviews. People liked him. He wasn't afraid to have some back and forth, Yeah. And so, I just thought he would be good. The one mistake that I think I made over the years at FNZ hiring people, which I had to hire so many people. I mean, with budgets and all this stuff, but because Taylor was a Gary Williams type of host, which is a great solid host,
he decided to hire Mark.
I needed somebody in there that was going to piss people off, and so I hired Mark James, and I loved his tape, and his references all checked out. I've got hits out on every one of those, by the way.
Where had he been?
He had been in Miami.
Yeah, I knew he was in Florida.
And by the way, he's as talented as anybody. I mean, he just couldn't get out of his own way, but he was very talented. And so we put him in there, and he was used to being the guy driving the show. And anyway, that caused me heartburn for, I think we did that show for 2 years. A lot of time.
He's just not a likable guy. Whereas Taylor is a great human being.
Yeah.
No one has ever used Mark and great human being in the same sentence.
That's true.
Well, Mark, honestly though,
if you got to know him,
he
had to break. You had to break through the wall.
He was just the only child kind of guy that just seemed like he never had his ass whooped. But it was amazing because I came as close to whooping his ass as anybody that ever worked for me. Matter of fact, there was 2 times where
the police officers when he got the speeding ticket.
Oh man,
when
the speeding ticket thing. Oh my God,
I'm one of 3 guys that do a 5-hour radio show.
Stan, I was in the car wash across the street from my kid's school. They were both in 5th grade, 6th, whatever it was, and I'm getting my car wash to go pick them up, and I hear that. And my blood starts boiling, and I couldn't, I just was like, come on, car wash.
Well, he got a speeding ticket on the way into work.
Yeah.
And then as he got a speeding ticket, he decides to go on air, immediately, and starts shitting on the Charlotte Police Department. And not only that, he starts calling out the badge number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the most unbelievable thing.
And here I am from Charlotte. I've got a bunch of buddies that are Charlotte cops. I'm a big supporter of all the
Sure.
public service. And when he said that, I was so mad that if I would have been in that radio station, I don't know, I probably would have kicked his ass.
Well, he yanked I did yank him right off the show.
I called whoever was producing. It was I don't even remember who was producing the show at that point in time, but
might have been Yarbs.
I yanked him off the air right away, like 5 minutes into the show, and then I suspended him for at least a week or whatever. Yep. He went back on and apologized and made it right. But yeah, there was a few times that I went batshit on that dude. But again, he really was a good dude. He ended up going to Boston and doing TV, and I'm not sure where he is now. But
he got fired from a bunch of places.
Well, he went to. So here's how.
He asked for autographs. I remember from those players.
All right, I'm gonna tell the story.
Really?
I'm part of that story.
The reason why he asked for the autographs, he was trying to do something good for his boss.
No, I wasn't his boss at the time.
Yes, you were.
He was working in Atlanta.
Okay.
Because
who's going to bring you autographs?
Well, here's what happened. When his contract was coming up, I knew I was going to go in a different direction because people didn't like him. He was driving me nuts. And so Atlanta was putting the FM sports station on, Top 5 market, and they were looking for somebody to do their morning show. And I went, dude, I got your guy, Mark James.
Oh, you're so bad.
And so
you did that to him.
And the program director there hates me to this day, but
as well he should.
Yeah, well, they hired him and he's there and whatever. And so long story short, he's covering the Braves games, and Mark is a big Mets fan, as I am. And he said he was going to go to the game that day and whatever. And I said,
he had his press pass.
Yeah, whatever. Long story short, I didn't ask him for anything, but the next day he calls me and he got 2 autograph balls for my kids. I think Noah Syndergaard was one of them, and Paul Wilson, or not Paul Wilson, Batman, Matt Harvey.
Oh, Matt Harvey.
It was 2 really good autographs. Yeah. I mean, I wish I would have got the damn things. but evidently the Braves,
they're sitting in his wall.
You're not supposed to ask for autographs in there.
Of course not.
And he did it nonchalantly, I think out of the way, but somebody saw him and pulled on him. And so he calls me and he's like, hey, man, I need your help on this.
It was the main person for the Braves.
Whoever it was. And Mark called me and goes, hey, man, can you help me on this? You know, I got autographs, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, just whoever's mad at you, just tell them to call me and I'll tell them that I asked you to do it for me. And I was going to use the ball, and I'll cover for you.
Yeah.
God, Father Teresa, man.
Yeah, it didn't work. Nobody ever called me. I think whoever was his boss at the time was like, this is our chance. Probably like it'd be like the Cleveland Browns having a way out of that Deshaun Watson contract. I think that his radio station.
Well, there's going to get Justin Tucker anyway, so
that's a whole different story. Let's finish up real quick.
Yeah.
And thank you guys again for joining us. But I want to ask you a question. Stan, you're a Tar Heel. Frank and I are Duke fans, and anyone can win in that game. We know that. We've seen.
No, they can't. No, they can't.
You don't think Carolina has a chance this weekend?
Zip.
All right. Here's what I'm going to say to you.
0-0-0.
Right.
And you know what?
This is what
I love the Tar Heels with all my heart.
I talked to you doing that same shit, like we're going to buy it. First of all, and I hate the Tar Heels, so I'm going to come off like I'm a Tar Heel fan now. But
will you give me 30?
Huh?
I'll take it if you give me 35 bucks.
No, I won't give you that. I won't give you that much. If you look at Carolina's, I'm not saying Carolina's a great team, but if you look at their losses, they've lost to really good teams for the most part.
They've lost 8 games by less than double digits, less than 10 points to top 25 teams.
Yeah, did you guys see their last game?
I did.
One for their last 12, and their guys were just driving into people and losing the ball.
They've definitely lost some continuity. They're not playing together. There's something going on.
What to me, it looked gutless. And I mean, those kids seem like great kids and everything.
I thought I had it. My son bet for the other way, and he won at least.
Totally looked that way.
Yeah, there's something definitely not right. But with that said, there's still, they played a lot of these really good teams close.
Hey, now this may be the only time I'm on here, so can I tell you a real interesting story? I have an elevator story.
Oh, let's hear it.
I'm covering the World Series 1996, Braves and the Yankees. The Braves go up and just kick the Yankees' tail 2 straight up there. On the elevator, Steinbrenner's box for the old Yankee Stadium was right, he had the whole thing right above the press area, So we're on the same elevator going down. I get on the elevator, it's crowded. And one of the guys in the back corner of the elevator is Henry Kissinger.
Wow.
Our former longtime Secretary of State who opened up China and all that other good stuff.
Yeah.
So he's on the elevator and everybody's like, Henry Kissinger. And there's a pause and dead silence with like 20 people on the elevator. And he says, I've had days like this. I've lost countries on days like this.
No way.
He said that. And everybody just broke out laughing because it's like, then you're kind of going, yeah, it's just a baseball game.
Yeah, that's strong. Well, and the Tar Heel thing is that I think Carolina fans are just trying to make it look like we know we're going to get our ass so we're going to lose. So when they do win, it ain't going to mean they're not going to talk as much shit as they normally would. They're going to. And Frank and I did some research last week on those games. There's been a lot of times when Duke sucked and has beat Carolina twice and vice versa. And so I don't think by any stretch of the imagination it's going to be a blow. I think Carolina's going to play their best game possible. Now, can they?
I think you're right about that. I think they will. I think they'll go out and probably. I bet it's close at halftime, and I think Duke wears them back. Duke's got the big guys, and Carolina's
got the tallest team in the country.
Yeah, they're monsters. And Carolina can't play against anybody who has a decent big guy.
They missed Baker. I thought he had 8 more years of eligibility. But, I didn't know that.
No, his 8 were up.
Yeah, that's what it was. Did you see Belichick is delivering pizzas to all the fraternities at Carolina during the Duke Carolina game?
Is he
fraternity sorority?
Smart.
Fraternity. He can only do one sorority. That's what his girlfriend is. He wouldn't be allowed to do her head of sorority.
Smart though.
It is smart.
Listen, it's smart. That's what you do.
He's going to do. I mean, listen. They're going to be really good next year. I mean, it's not going to take long for him.
All the people who disagreed with the hire, I don't get, because if you can get a guy like him, I don't care if he hasn't been a college coach, man. Yeah. If you know football and you're a teacher, which is what he's always been, do it.
College is no longer, college anymore. It's become the minor leagues of the pros. It really is.
And that's the exact analogy.
There used to be a time where college coaches held the keys to your car.
Right.
You're going to listen to me or else you're not going to pros.
That's right.
Now they just go somewhere else.
Sure.
And it's so similar to pros. I mean, the difference in pros probably have even more power over their players than colleges do because you're bound to a contract.
Yeah.
Now college players, one and done, they go to somebody's school next year, become free agent every single year that they're there.
Oh, and you hear these guys and they say, this is his first year at Louisville. Last year he was at Kent State.
That's right.
The year before that he was at such and
You're going to see at the quarterback position, it's going to be a rotating door, and the money's just going to keep getting higher and higher and higher.
Well, you and I talked about this, and Tom, we kind of talked about this when you first got here this afternoon, is that, we all used to be able to name every player on every college team. Every player. And then you can name every player on the NBA team and exactly where they went to college. And now it's impossible. It's impossible. You can't do it. And because of that, college basketball in particular, for me at least, I stopped watching it as much. And this year I've picked it back up a little bit because doing the podcast and Duke's a lot of fun to watch with these young kids and the product itself, I've been very surprised. The college basketball product is actually really good right now. It's not it in the NBA where it's 100 3-pointers and let's see who makes the most. It's actually really good. I mean, I saw a dude post up the other day in college basketball and I almost fell out. It was the first time I've seen somebody get the ball and back somebody down in forever. But it really hurt basketball the most to me. Football, I'm a big Notre Dame fan. We're going to watch that and you're going to figure it out, whoever the players are. Basketball has kind of lost it a little bit, but I'm excited still for Duke. This is the last question I was going to ask you. Of all the sports you've covered, what's the biggest rivalry that you covered as maybe as a fan or as a reporter? But as a reporter, what was the biggest rivalry you ever, where you were there and you're like, holy crap, this is for real?
Two for me. I mean, it was Duke, North Carolina. It was also Alabama, Auburn, and Texas, Oklahoma. But still,
football,
just the intent, right? The intensity, especially when in Cameron. I mean, to go to a game there and you're going to press row and the students have to let you in to get access to your seat.
Yeah.
And it is just so absolutely intense. And
110 degrees.
And the football games were. I mean, Alabama, Auburn is huge. Oklahoma, Texas, the way they align the fans is huge. But I've never seen it like, of course, Minnesota, Iowa. No, I've never seen it like Duke and UNC in basketball.
That's what I'll say. What about you, Stan?
Well, I got to tell you that Tom is just. I mean, that Duke Carolina's good. I'll give it great. But, I'm talking about things that we've covered.
Yep.
It's nothing. I covered Charlotte's AA baseball team played Birmingham in the playoffs.
Wow.
And Rochester. And there's nothing like the rivalry. There'd be 4,000 fans going nuts.
You know what?
Going absolutely nuts.
Now,
DJ,
I will say this about that game. I don't remember it. Obviously, I don't know if I was probably like 5 years old. But But I bet you that the Charlotte O's lineup probably had a couple future Hall of Famers in it. Like, was that when they had Eddie Murray?
You know, you look back in the day when they had Eddie Murray, they had Cal Ripken Jr., who was a great guy, by the way. Murray could be edgy.
I'm going to real quick story. My dad, somehow we were at a Charlotte O game. And again, I had to be sad. I don't know how old it was, but somehow he got us back in the locker room, back to naked dudes in the locker room story. And they're like, hey, let's go back here. And their first base.
Frank was there, right?
Yeah. No, Frank was doing the lawn service for the yard. He's thought they're getting field ready for the next game. It was a doubleheader. But so I'm in the locker room and they bring me, hey, this guy, Eddie Murray, switch hitter, he's going to be great. He's got a bat for you. Wow. I walked back there and I didn't know which was I was supposed to grab. Which one's the bat? He was naked. And I'm 7 years old. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? But he gave me a bat. He had broken it in that game, and he gave it to me. I had it forever. I don't know if I still where it would be, but he gave me a bat.
It's so cool.
Packer took it into the meeting.
No, I think that one Pack had was
it wasn't broken.
It was
I will tell you one. See, people get carried away, and Carolina Duke. I mean, Tom's right. It's just unbelievable. Yeah. But Tom will also remember this was when Bobby Lutz was at Charlotte. And Charlotte was, people forget how really good they were.
I mean, I've been going to all their games since I was 2 years old. Yeah.
And the thing about it was, remember Cincinnati and Huggins?
Conference USA.
Conference USA.
Man.
It was huge.
Think of the coaches in that conference. We had Patino. We had Calipari.
Yep.
We had Huggins.
Yep.
Obviously Bobby Lutz. And I missed one more. That conference was strong, man. I mean,
who was at Tulane? They weren't that good at the time.
Tulane had the guy that
there is somebody you're missing.
I'm missing another good one. The guy Tulane had like a box cut.
Yeah.
Black guy with a box cut.
Percy Perry.
Yeah.
Perry was there. Yeah. And then he went to Georgia Tech after that.
Yeah, he kind of had that same. He did the whole Arkansas stuff where
yes.
Run gun.
Yeah, run gun.
Yeah, but that conference at the time.
Oh, conference was loaded. They get like 6 bids. It was incredible.
Yeah, and
you had Cincinnati, Louisville,
Memphis.
Yep.
And Memphis had a good coach. Well, that's what we're talking about.
I think that's Calipari. Yeah, right. Louisville was Patino.
Yeah.
Huggins was West Virginia or
Cincinnati.
Lutz at Charlotte. But we're missing one more.
And Duquesne was good for a while, and they were in there for a while.
But when Huggins was there, Patino, and those good teams, and Calipari, his dad, I think, lived here in Charlotte or something. And
Calipari's dad worked out at Douglas.
Yeah, he would come to all the games. But it'd be sold out in there, and it would be loud, and it was great.
It was great.
And I hate it because again, Charlotte's going to get killed by NIL and basketball in particular. I mean, you look at the guys that played on Charlotte's basketball team last year and the year before, and they're all starting kicking ass. One of the guys is on Minnesota who played an integral part in those 2 big wins you had last week. We've got a guy, what's his name? He starts for Tennessee right now. The porn kid that was here last year. I mean, they're all, we've got Bryce Williams, Henry's sons playing at Nebraska, scoring 20 points a night. Like all these guys that would have been here.
Man, Henry.
He's my favorite ever, man. Henry,
I love Henry.
God.
And he's such a good guy,
I saw him standing next to Cornbread Maxwell. And I said, man, look at this. I said, it's the best player in Charlotte history and Cornbread. So he's got, okay, that's good. I'll get you back.
Cornbread would like that, though. He would like it. Good.
Cornbread, when I was young, would eat dinner at our house sometimes when he played there.
Wow. Did he really?
Yeah. And so, so when he started coming back and working for us, in the summers when the Celtics weren't playing, he would come work and always he would be the one too. And Cornbread's a great dude. He was funny as hell. But
he was funny.
He was hilarious. And he would always go, man, when am I going to get a damn raise, man? Like it's been years. I'm like, nah, Cornbread, we just bumped you up $5. I'm like, Cornbread. I think Cornbread was the first person to teach me exactly how ex-wives can take a lot of your money. But Cornbread would eat dinner at our house, so we always had a great relationship. And I told the story last week about some guy pissing him off, and him telling him to F off, and we didn't dump it. And I hear it in my office, and I'm like, oh God, I'm running down there. And so it was a big deal. And so I brought Cornbread back, and I said, hey man, when are you going back to Boston for a little while? He goes, man, I'm gone for like the next 3 weeks. I said, all right, you're suspended for the next 3 weeks. So everyone thought we suspended him for And that's what it was. I wasn't going to suspend him for that.
Seth Greenberg was also part of that conference.
South Florida.
Yeah.
Oh,
South Florida.
I forgot all about that.
Yeah.
And Seth
And,
Greenberg was down there, and he couldn't win in that league
Yeah, he
because
used
it
to be-
was so good.
He was always just a pain in the ass when we would book him on the show.
Seth,
Yeah.
he complained so.
I couldn't stand him. And so actually we'll end with this story because it goes back to rivalries. For the Duke Carolina game day for ESPN is going to be at Cameron. But Arkansas is playing Kentucky at the same time, and it's Calipari's, coming back to Kentucky for the first time. Seth Greenberg was saying we're doing Duke Carolina, and the rumor is that he said I'm not going Kentucky Arkansas, we're doing Duke Carolina, which I would agree with him on that. Although seeing Calipari's return is going to be kind of interesting to see. But yeah, behind the scenes, they said that the reason that happened was Seth was like, I'm not doing that. We're doing Duke Carolina. And that's when we think about the rivalries. Cause to me, Duke Carolina basketball is by far the best rivalry in basketball. But I saw an interview with Pitino yesterday, or not an interview. He put it on Twitter.
Yeah.
And he goes, the last time I did a video for Kentucky, I told you to hire Mark Pope, and you did. And I think I was right. I think everybody's happy now. But now I'm going to tell you this. John Calipari and I have never been buddies. We're not good friends. I respect him. He's a great coach. But I'm going to just tell you this, Kentucky fans. And he basically said, when I had my first time back coming to Rupp, it really hurt me, the booze. It bothered me for days. Like it really hurt him. And he said he was just talking to Providence's head coach, Cooley, who had just went back to Seton Hall, and they wear him out there, and same thing brought him to tears. Like it really hurts because they did so much good at these schools. And so he basically was telling Kentucky fans, this guy did a lot of great things for you guys. Cheer him, be classy and respect. You guys were wanting him gone anyway. He saw the tea leaves, and I thought that was pretty cool that Pitino brought that up.
That really is. And what do you think's going to happen?
I'm going to boo the shit out of him. I definitely think they're going to boo the shit out of him. Wait, thank you guys for joining us, man. This has been fun, and it's exactly what I wanted these type of shows to be, was just storytelling, and you guys obviously covering sports. We could have done 7 more hours of this.
We'll give it a little while, and we'll do another one.
Yeah, we'll have you back again, but thank you guys for coming. Frank, thank you. Yep. Dylan, thank you over there. Big D did a good job, and we'll see you next week. Thank you.